What's up, and welcome back to ESPN FC Live here on YouTube alongside Luis Miguel Echegaray, Stevie Nickel. I'm Dallin Cuff. Great to chat with you guys today. We got a lot to cover. Got some big games in the Premier League. LaLiga, Girona continues to be an amazing story. Sam Marsden will join us shortly, our Barcelona correspondent, to talk about that. But we are on the eve of the Arsenal-Aston Villa game. Arsenal coming off an improbable win. Aston Villa coming off maybe the win of the year as they took down City. Let's hear from Mikel Arteta before we start a discussion.
A huge credit to them, huge credit to Unai and the coaching staff for what they've done, the way they turn things around, the way they play. They're gonna be a really tough opponent. It's a great place to go. It's one of my favorite grounds, very English ground, great atmosphere to play football. So it's going to be a big chance for us. What he's done for every team has been always remarkable. He always improved the players, the team, the club, and he's Basque, like I am, and he's a manager that I really admire for what he's done in the game. He's done it in various countries, in different levels, and always been successful. So I'm really happy for him.
That's Mikel Arteta speaking about Unai Emery. Within the three of us, our allegiance is obviously Stevie, great player at Liverpool. LME is a villain. I'm a gooner. Big Saturday for us. I'll let you cook though, LME. Go ahead. Just let's talk about Emery. Just what was this midweek win like? And what are you thinking for Saturday?
Let me cook, Dallin Cup. This is the only reason why I was hired for ESPN, to finally, in this moment, it's Aston Villa's moment. Thank you so much. And listen, as you mentioned, the win against Manchester City was historic. And I'm telling you this, I've been supporting this club since I was 12 years old, since I moved from Peru to England. And that's the best I have ever seen them play in the Premier League. It was remarkable. Pep Guardiola's Manchester City conceded 13 shots in the first half, the most out of any team in the history since he came into that game. In the end, it was 22 shots. No team has ever done that, definitely in the space of 15 years from the top 5 European leagues. This was a massive statement from Unai Emery and Aston Villa. But the thing is, Dallin, it's more than just that win. People need to look at the overall context of what Unai Emery has done since day one, which has been a year in change. It's remarkable. Villa were 17th when Unai Emery came into this team. And now look, in third place. And yes, the answer is yes. At this moment, because you would be a fool to argue against it, they are definitely fighting for the title right now. Who knows what may happen in February or March? But right now, that is definitely the answer. It was an absolute lecture against Manchester City. And now comes Arsenal, which is definitely another test. I think it's an actually tougher test just because in that game against Man City, obviously without Kevin De Bruyne and Rodri, and they really miss Gundogan, Villa really took advantage in the midfield. But now your Arsenal have Declan Rice, who could be the signing of the year by any team. They have Martin Odegaard, so it's going to be a tougher test. But if Villa win, Dallin Cuff and Stevie Nickel, it will be 15 straight home victories. 15 straight home victories. Arsene Wenger didn't do that. Mourinho didn't do that. That's a remarkable statement. Up the Villa, up the Unai Emery, baby.
Well, he cooked. Well done there. And 15 straight wins is not, clearly nothing to sneeze at if they can get it done. Stevie, let's touch on that City game, though. It wasn't just they won. To LME's point, it's the manner in which they won. What of all have you taken? What, if anything, have you taken out of that performance, or just Villa's recent form?
I think it's impossible not to ask yourself the question of were Villa just that good, or were Man City just had a bad night? You can't argue that Villa were just that good. I don't think there's any argument. I find it interesting that LME's just said that we're now going to get a tougher test after playing Man City. I don't think we were thinking that before the kickoff, but he's probably right. And I think the tougher test will be, can he get through that back four? Obviously we know the questions about the goalkeeping situation, but the test is Arsenal's back four, because I think Arsenal's back line, that back four, is probably the best in the Premier League, and so that will be a problem. But if they can carry on what they did against City, and for me the biggest thing was the middle of the park. They completely dominated it, Camara and particularly McGinn. Douglas Luiz was great, and that gave Bailey just a chance to run it, whoever was in front of him. Obviously Guardiola couldn't handle him, and Ollie Watkins right now is on fire. So I see this as a fantastic game. I can see goals in it, and I'm going to have to concede that LME's right. This will be a tougher test than Manchester City was.
Yeah, that's an interesting statement. Definitely not something we would have thought we'd be saying on Monday as we fast forward to Friday. LME, I'll come back to you with let's go to Arsenal real quick because they're midweek. You can't drop points at Luton. It just can't happen, and they found a way. In literally the last ember of the game, Declan Rice's header, that was an absolutely huge result. When you look at that result, is that more? Would you think it was more indicative of a team that's capable of continuing this championship run, or was that showing some chinks in the armor to be at Luton and to even be in that situation where you're down 3-2 late game?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's a bit of both, to be honest with you, because we do know, historically speaking, as an Arsenal fan, you know better than most how this often happens. It happened literally last season where Arsenal are looking good, they're looking great. We literally talked about it in the show. And then they allow opponents, with all due respect to Luton Town, weaker opponents to come back into this game. But having said that, in other seasons, they either stay in that result as an equalizer or they lose it. And that did not happen. And it just happened to fact that the equalizing goal from Arsenal came from Kai Havertz and the winning goal came from Declan Rice, 2 arrivals this summer, the latter being absolute key. And I've said this before, and I'm not the only one that said it. It's not like this revelatory statement, but the reason why Arsenal were so fantastic back in the day, specifically their undefeated year, was because of a player like Patrick Vieira. Declan Rice can do that. Mikel Arteta literally said it to me this summer. I needed more leaders. I needed more players with aura, and that's what happened. Having said all of that, though, Dallin, I do worry about some areas. I still don't know if David Raya is an improvement on Aaron Ramsdale. I actually saw and heard an interesting statistic where at home, I believe David Raya is better, and away, Aaron Ramsdale is better. So maybe Mikel Arteta has to rotate every single time. But I still think they need a striker in January. But you can't deny the amazing performances of Bukayo Saka. And Martin Odegaard is probably one of my favorite players in the Premier League. And Declan Rice, of course. And as Stevie said, that defensive unit is very good. But there are chinks in the armor. There are little things that you can really break up here. And I believe Villa can do it. But guess what? You know, Villa has not won at Villa Park against Arsenal in front of fans, because they did it in 2020 and 21 when there were no fans. But they haven't done it in front of fans in a very long time. In fact, it was 1998, Dallin Cuff, when we won at Park in front of fans. So I was there. It was a 3-2 comeback. So it's gonna be tricky. But you know, this is the season for Arsenal to really get going.
Stevie, you mentioned the Raya situation. LME obviously said it there. What do you do as a manager here? Is he going to ride out Raya? What would it take to go back to Ramsdale outside of, obviously he couldn't play against his parent club about a week and a half ago, because we saw Ramsdale back in. What would you do here? What's the situation?
Well, what I would do, which I don't believe is what Arteta's going to do, is sit Raya on his backside. You know, it's one thing to be stubborn. It's another thing to actually make a problem you have worse. Because if he hasn't lost Ramsdale already, if he doesn't play in this game, there's no question Ramsdale's out the door, because he will absolutely down tools. You know, as a professional footballer, we all understand that sometimes you don't start. But you have to have some sort of belief that if the guy in your position, whether it's goalkeeper, centre forward, centre back, whatever it may be, you have to have some sort of belief, and you have to have some sort of message from the manager that if that man in your position is not doing it, you get an opportunity. Because that's what keeps you running hard in training. That's what keeps you turning up and giving every single thing for yourself and for your team. But if at the end of it, you figure out that regardless of what happens, you ain't getting a shot, you're down in tools. You are absolutely down in tools. And so if Arteta goes with Raya, not only is he going to lose Ramsdale, but you're going to have a goalkeeper in there who's under severe pressure. And he's shown, in my opinion, this season, that as the games go on, he looks more nervy and he's making more mistakes. And so if you expect a guy just to turn up all of a sudden, having made a lot of mistakes, having thrown 2 in the previous game, and all of a sudden he's going to be this fantastic goalkeeper that you thought you were getting, that's not realistic. So this is a huge problem. And certainly if Arteta doesn't play Ramsdale, then he's going to have more problems. So yeah, watch this space. I don't see him changing. He's been stubborn over it.
Yeah.
But hey, let's see what happens.
Yeah, to say that Raya was shaky the last game, and it's not just last match; it's other matches too. It basically did. He really did. In terms of the game, LME, we'll get a score line from you. I think we know where we're going in terms of the pick. Stevie, give me the breakdown. What do you think of this game? This is a big game in the top 4 clash. Right now, Villa's plus 160. They're second favorites to get that final spot, right behind Newcastle. We're going to talk about in a minute, and right ahead of Tottenham, who also we're going to talk about. What do you see in this game, though, Villa and Arsenal? What do you got prediction?
I'm going for a draw. I'm going for a score draw. I think both sides will score. I think the goalkeeper situation will be a problem. But I think Arsenal will take advantage. You know, you've got two sides who like to have some space. You know, Saka and Martinelli on the wide areas when Villa go forward. Because this Villa side, when they get the opportunity, absolutely get forward. They get men forward. And of course, when you do that, you do leave space. So I can see Martinelli and Saka in particular taking advantage of that. So yeah, I can see a draw here.
LME, what you got?
You're going to ask me the scoreline, really?
Well, yeah, give me 5-1. I don't know. Give me what you want.
Before I say it, I will say, though, that from the excellent point that Stevie said about David Raya and Aaron Ramsdale, the battle will be in the midfield in this game, Dallin, because I do believe that what happens is when Unai Emery uses either Bouba Kamara with Douglas Luiz, John McGinn, and Yuri Tillemans, it's a sort of a very fluid, rotated sort of midfield that really capitalized against Manchester City. I mean, John McGinn made Rico Lewis look like a third grader in that game. And without Rodri, it was very easy. This is a different game. Declan Rice is one of the best in the business. And with Martin Odegaard as well, who can pull the chains, it will be a tricky one. So that game will be decided in there, I think. But listen, my friend, this is an Aston Villa victory. 15, and we're going to win 2-1, baby. It's going to be 2-1. It's going to be 1-0 for a very long time. And then John McGinn and Stevie Nichol's going to tell you his nickname in a second. John McGinn will score the win. It'll be 2-1 to the Villa. Up the Villa.
It's a variation of Braveheart. Let me just say that.
Feel free to look it up, folks. It's a good one. You look it up, and we're going to leave it at that. I would take a point in this game as a Gooner, but that would be a fine result for me. They're up 4 in the table. And obviously, we have Villa's playing. Happy to see if that happens. We'll find out. 12:30 on Saturday. All right, let's go to Sunday's big game. Spurs, Newcastle. We talk about two teams coming off great wins. These teams are coming off bad losses. They're both sitting outside the top 4 right now. Newcastle 1 point adrift of Spurs. Stevie, I'll start with you. What is your concern level with Spurs in this losing run they've been on, and where are you at with Newcastle?
Listen, I think Spurs were always going to struggle with the amount of injuries and with the changes they've had to make, and the fact that they've lost their best players. You know, you got Van de Ven at the back, who up until he got injured was probably the best centre back in the Premier League this season so far. You got James Maddison, who again before he got injured was arguably one of the best midfielders in the Premier League this season. And you don't have those guys along with the other injuries. You don't have Bettencourt in the middle. You're going to have to play Højbjerg again. You know, so Spurs were always going to have a period where they struggle, particularly the way they play as well, because they want to go forward, and that leaves holes. Having said all that, Newcastle are they're just tired. I mean, they've just run out of juice. Yeah. They have nobody to bring on the field to give anybody a rest. Lascelles went off at the end of the Everton game the other day as well with looked like a knock. I mean, this team is running on empty. It's got plenty of heart and spirit, but, you know, they've had a ton of games recently, talking about Europe as well as the Premier League, without being able to make changes. Spurs, on the other hand, yes, they've had bad results, but the players are rested. And you can't imagine, with the amount of possession that I think Spurs are going to get in this game, that they're not going to take advantage of it eventually. Plus, they're at home, another away game for Newcastle. I just don't see Newcastle having the energy to outdo Spurs here. Spurs are desperate to get a victory, particularly at home. I can't see anything other than a Spurs win, to be quite honest with you.
Interesting. Elmi, where are you at? With both, give me kind of the same assessment of both clubs and where they're at.
Yeah, no, I kind of have to agree with Stevie Nicol here. This is a little bit, Dallin, like imagine two out and out, gung-ho, knockout style boxers who are in the 11th round right now, and they're just like beat, absolutely beat. And the injury list is alarming for both sides. I mean, you're talking at about, I think, 12 injuries for Newcastle United across the squad. And then I was also looking at some research regarding how much Eddie Howe uses his substitutes, and it's been about 25 to 30 minutes across the board. That's just not, you have to rely, if you want to be successful in this Premier League, you have to use your squad, not just your 11. And I think that's an issue for Newcastle. And like Stevie said, they're just so tired. Everton, at points were playing like prime Brazil in the 70s against them. And that's a bit alarming for them. So again, it's this sophomore slump when you make it into the Champions League and suddenly you have to worry about playing the likes of PSG and other big teams in Europe. And then on the back of that, you have to play 8 matches in December. So that's an issue. For Tottenham, well, they're the first team who have led 5 matches in the Premier League and lost all of them. And it's because partly of Postecoglou's philosophy, right? Which is just like, we're going to go at you, mate. No matter what, we're going to just go. And I'm going to stick to it until I die. And I love that about Postecoglou. I'm a big fan of his. But in the Premier League, that's a marathon, not a sprint. That's a problem. Now, Heung-min Son went out injured against West Ham. He might be ready for this game, but in terms of how good he'll look, we'll have to see about that. James Maddison still, suffering. Cuti Romero did come back, of course, but, they still don't have those pieces. So I'm with Stevie. It's like, it's very tough to figure out just because of how tired they are. But at home, they need that win desperately. I think it's going to be a Tottenham win, even though the last time they played, it was a St. James's Park. It was a 6-1 victory to Newcastle, but that's not going to happen today. I think Tottenham's going to win this one.
Okay, they have 3 of those 5 losses are at home right now, but I got the desperation. I obviously hear both of you. Stevie, you said Spurs win. Give me a score. What do you think?
I'm going to go 3-1.
3-1. LME?
Yeah, the 3-0 loss to Everton alarmed me, Dallin. I think it's going to be 2-0 to Tottenham, but I think they're going to have a lot of shots against Newcastle. They're very tired. And also, no Nick Pope. We haven't even talked about that part. Like, that's a big one. Yeah,
that's a big one, that have not have your keeper. And then obviously they are playing Milan with everything to play for in midweek. So as you said, it's coming thick and fast for the Magpies now. All right, Stevie, thank you for so much. We're going to ship you off. We're going to slide in here Sam Marsden, our Barcelona. Later, man. We'll slide in Sam Marsden, our Barcelona correspondent. Got a great piece up on Girona and up on ESPN.com. So be sure to check that out. Huge game they have this coming weekend. And when you look at from your piece there, Sam, it was interesting to read. Again, people check it out. I guess I'll just go with you big picture. Do you think they have the staying power to maintain a title challenge in the Liga right there with Real Madrid? Obviously, Barcelona's behind them now. Do you think they can maintain this? Can they be the Leicester of the Liga?
This is where we are, isn't it? We're sort of slowly getting towards there. We're 15 games in now, and everyone's sort of been waiting for them to, to start dropping points, and it's just not happened yet. And even in Girona, they're sort of aware that, expectations have shifted. Obviously, in the piece, we speak with a lot of directors, players not so brazen with their expectations. They're more sort of sticking to the game by game motto. But the executives now are saying, look, the position we're in, we've got to be targeting European football. I think the fight now, if that's what they're saying sort of publicly, I think privately they're thinking, look, we've got a real good shot at the top 4. I think we need to see, much more sustained challenge before we're really, really talking about them as, a Leicester. But the way they're going, the way they're playing, I can't rule anything out. I think what was interesting last weekend, I was at the Valencia game at Girona when they came back to win 2-1. And it was just interesting how much they sort of believed in themselves when they were behind, how much they believed in their way of playing. And it felt inevitable that they were going to win that game. And also just the reaction from the ground, from the players, from the coaching staff. That wasn't the reaction of, look, coming back to win 2-1 is a great result, whatever. But that was the reaction of a team that was, really starting to believe that something special could happen. And I mean, something special for Girona would be European football for the first ever time. But I think they're thinking that, Champions League football could be a real possibility.
And you mentioned it there, that the belief of this team is remarkable. They have the most points rescued from losing positions in the top 5 leagues in Europe. It's been impressive. One other question, just a big picture. I know LME, we talked about this off camera. You want to kind of look at this upstart. They're tied with Real Madrid on points. They're 4 ahead of Barcelona before their match this weekend. But they are part of Citigroup. They're part of this massive conglomerate. How does that factor into their success, or even how they're maybe viewed in Spain or abroad?
Yeah, I mean, it's rarely mentioned in Spain, really. But I mean, you can't talk about the Girona story without talking about the connection to the City Football Group, who have been involved since 2017. They got involved just after Girona's first ever promotion to LaLiga. So that sort of upturn in the club's fortune had started to happen just before City Football Group got involved. But it's interesting to view them as, you know, a part of one of the 13 clubs, either part-owned or partners with the City Football Group, because obviously, you know, without that, they probably don't have this success. I mean, if you look at the makeup of their squad this season, they've got guys on loan from other City Football Group clubs. You know, Savio, their star winger this season, is on loan from Troyes. Jan Couto is on loan from Manchester City. Other players have played for Manchester City before. Last season, they of course had Tati Castellanos from New York City. So they take huge advantage of the network of clubs and players that are available to them through the City Football Group. But I mean, from there to being, you know, where they are top of the league is obviously another big leap. You know, we can't deny that they're completely overperforming. Other coaches, we spoke to the Alaves coach a couple of weeks ago after Barca beat them 2-1 about Girona and whether, you know, Girona could be a benchmark for you know, other clubs like Alaves. You know, Alaves is a club with traditionally much more history than Girona, but he was very much like, great story, completely overperforming, but don't compare us with Girona. He didn't strictly say why, but you got the feeling it was because, look, even though we've got these LaLiga, you know, wage limits, everyone has a set limit. Girona's is 52 million, which is a bit more than Alaves is. It places them 14th in the league. They also have this, and this is what the sporting director Kike Casal also said to us this week. They have this competitive advantage in the transfer market where they can work with you know, sort of more knowledge and with City Football Group.
I mean, you got to leverage every opportunity, every angle you got to try to break the duopoly. We'll not leave Atleti out. Obviously, they're in the mix too. Obviously, in most years in LaLiga. All right, LME, let's talk Barcelona though. They're 4 points adrift for this game. They haven't scored more than 2 goals in over 2 months in a match. I mean, how do you feel about Xavi's side and granted, injuries aside, where they're at?
Yeah, Barcelona have been a very interesting story in the last, I guess, ever since the financial crisis that happened way before in regards to legalities. And then when Xavi came in and made everything, I think it's funny because on paper, in many ways, things are generally okay competing in the Champions League, obviously fighting Girona, as Sam was saying, and Real Madrid in La Liga. But I'm a little bit worried, as you mentioned, about the overuse of their young talent, including Pedri and, of course, Gavi, which is such a terrible story. And now, and I guess the answer, Dallin, goes to a question to Sam, because obviously this is the team he covers extensively. What's going on with Robert Lewandowski? And why has there not really been a plan for him after? Because the contract is up till 2026, right? Was that a mistake? What's going on with him? And is there an immediate solution even as early as January?
Yeah, I mean, Lewandowski's been out of form. I mean, he perhaps a victim of his own initial success at Barcelona. Up until the World Cup when they first signed him, he was almost carrying that team. He scored some really important goals in, you know, the Champions League, even though they eventually went out. I remember a winner against Mallorca in a 1-0 win, and he was, you know, scoring more goals than games at that time. Since the World Cup, we're not really sure what's happened. His form has been hot and cold. Like you say, 8 goals in 17 games this season, which is, you know, far from his usual standards. There's been kind of a mix of reaction to it. On the one hand, Xavi and people at the club say, look, we've not been creating enough for him. On the other hand, there have then been games more recently, specifically this Atletico Madrid game last weekend, where he has missed chances. And then we're scratching our heads saying, well, there have been chances created for Lewandowski, and he's looked off form. I mean, he's always been a great finisher, especially in the air. He's been good for Barcelona, but just his all-round game has been slightly off this season. And like you say, he's tied into a long-term deal, obviously because of, you know, the amortization effect and Barca wanting to spread those payments over as many years as possible. I don't think we're going to see any sort of drastic solution in January. Obviously, Vitor Roque will come in from Brazil and provide competition, or at least provide some sort of backup to Lewandowski between now and the end of the season. But you don't want to sell Lewandowski and put all this weight on this young Brazilian shoulders, because like you say, we've seen what's happened with Gavi getting injured, Pedri getting injured. It's not necessarily the best tactic. Next summer is interesting because, you know, everyone at Barca, everyone close to Lewandowski, they say, look, no, Lewandowski wants to stay, but if his form doesn't improve, if Roque comes in and is brilliant, and there's interest from, let's say, you know, Saudi Arabia, countries or other leagues like that. I'm sure Barca will be saying, look, at least think about it, Robert, even if he wants to stay and compete at the top level. So basically, to get out of the question, I guess it all depends on how he can kick on now over the next 6 months. And some promising signs that Barca have found a little bit of form now that they've got Pedri and De Jong back, and perhaps they can start to create more chances for him.
To be fair, Dallin Cuff, like they just won 1-0 against the Atletico Madrid you were talking about. So there are some good signs, and Joao Felix, of course, still proves to be a pretty good answer in terms of that. But yeah, I mean, I don't care how young he is right now. I guess Vitor Roque can come soon enough to at least alleviate some of what's going on with Lewandowski. But it's an interesting storyline for sure.
Yeah, Sam, I like how you say, Rob, would you think about it from Saudi Arabia? Yeah, when they're coming with a 9-figure transfer fee, probably for a guy in his mid-30s. Please think about it. They would be asking for Barcelona. Yeah, take him. Give me that cash. Take the guy. Sam, what's the level of pressure do you feel right now in on Barcelona to perform in this match? You're 4 points back. You're coming off a big win, as Elmi just said, last weekend. What's the vibe like there around the club in terms of this match and pressure to kind of maintain pace here?
Yeah, it's not what it could have been. Obviously, we had the international break, which was followed by the draw at Rayo Vallecano, and it kind of reached a sort of crisis point after that Rayo Vallecano game, and we were looking ahead at the Porto Champions League game, the Atletico Madrid game, and then this Girona game, and saying, look, these are 3 huge games. Barca and Xavi could be in big trouble after them. They've beaten Porto. They've booked their place in the next round of the Champions League for the first time since 2021. They've beaten Atletico Madrid to move back above them in LaLiga, and now they've got Girona. So before the game, there's a little bit of calm. Xavi said after these Porto and Atletico Madrid games, he's gone, look, I go from game to game. I'm basically buying myself sort of like peace in between games. So he's bought himself peace until this Girona game. But yeah, if they drop points, if they lose, there's going to be another crisis, another sort of inquest into, is Michel better coach than Xavi? How are they losing at home to Girona? Because regardless of how good Girona have been, that won't be an acceptable reason for losing to them at home. So yeah, they've got some calm going into this game. But yeah, it's the same at Madrid and at Barca and all these clubs. Any defeat and they're just sort of a few seconds away from a full-blown crisis.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, Elmi, give me your thoughts on the match and a prediction, if you will.
I mean, I just think that given the nature of how everything is going, everything depends on home advantage. And I do think that Barcelona just about has the edge, but there's no short takings of what Girona have done, even with the City Football Group, because you still have to win matches. You still have to make it happen against some of the very big boys. But I think Barcelona is gonna win this. By the way, this is a local-ish game here, Dallin. You take a little bit of I did it last summer. Take a little an hour and a half trip all the way to the coast from Barcelona. I know that Sammy Marsden has done it many times. So it's not exactly a terrible assignment when you have to go from Barcelona to Girona in this game, or the other way around.
Yeah, so it's always been a friendly rivalry. So I was commenting earlier on a podcast to see how the dynamics of the relationship changes if Girona were to come to Montjuic this weekend and win and go 7 points clear and leave sort of Barca stranded for now in the title race, whether there would be a little bit of animosity or not. But for the moment, it's always been quite friendly. And, traditionally people from Girona often support Girona and Barca. That's slightly changing. And looking to the game, I'm really looking forward to it because I think they're both teams that play on the front foot, both want to have the ball, both want to attack, which isn't always the case when teams come to Barca. The problem that Girona have is when teams do come to play, Barca often tear them apart. They really struggle against teams, especially this season, that sit deep, that are organised. Girona obviously organised in a different way. So I think that perhaps it could play into Barca's hands. Obviously, Girona's only defeat this season was against Real Madrid. They were beaten 3-0. So the way that they play is obviously great most of the time, but when it comes up against Barca or Madrid, perhaps it won't quite be enough. And I think Barca will win this one just on the quality and hoping for an open game.
Yeah, every neutral's hoping for an open game. We'll find out 3:00 Eastern on ESPN Deportes and ESPN Plus. You can check that out. Sam, thank you so much. Enjoy the match this weekend.
Cheers, guys.
All right, LME, we're wrapping it up with MLS Cup. Columbus Crew taking on LAFC on Saturday. Give me your take. What do you think of the game? Who's your winner?
Yeah, very quick, Dallin. This exemplifies the very best of MLS, I think. It's the OGs, Columbus Crew, have been there from the beginning. Their former stadium was the first soccer-specific stadium in the U.S. By an MLS club. They've won MLS Cup twice. This is their 4th final. Cucho Hernandez, I'm sure many fans, specifically from Watford, will remember him. He's playing for them, so that should be a good one. And then on the other side, Dallin, you've got LAFC, the new boys in town, the kings of the dynasty right now. They're not even 10 years old, and they're looking to win another MLS Cup. Back-to-back, by the way. The last time that happened, their neighbors did it, LA Galaxy in 2011, 2012. So should be a good one. By the way, the biggest talking point, I think, as well, aside from the game itself, is Carlos Vela, because he has not yet extended that contract. So this could be his very final game for LAFC. He is literally the face, the voice, the identity of this very Mexican-American heavy club in downtown LA. So it should be interesting to see.
I can't wait. You want to pick a winner? Want to give me a thought?
So usually, I do believe that only once every time that, you know, the Supporters Shield leader hosts the game. So this game is obviously at Columbus Crew. Usually that's a victory, aside from one time, which was NYCFC when they won against Portland on penalties. But I'm going to go against the grain here, Dallin Cuff. I think LAFC is going to win once again. It will be a goodbye, a proper goodbye for Carlitos Vela, Charlie Cando. I think LAFC wins this one.
That'd be a cool way to go out. It's going to be 60 and rainy there in Columbus in December. So I don't know what the hell that's about, but it'll be an interesting game. All right, LME, appreciate it, man. Enjoy the game this weekend.
Thank you, brother.
See you, everybody.